What? Greetings, fellow Watford fans. Omar here, and it's time for the Orns observation. Of course, you know by now that the head coach of Watford Football Club, Paolo Pezzolano, has been sacked by Gino Pozzo. Roughly 24 hours ago, that took place, and in his stead, a welcome return to an old friend. Javi Gracia has now become the new Watford head coach for the men's first team. And of course, as you remember, I'm sure you do remember this, just 6 years ago, Javi Gracia was the Watford FC men's first team head coach, and he was walking out the door as he had been sacked in September of 2019. Javi Gracia, though, was immensely popular as a Watford FC head coach, and of course, we all know that he got us to the FA Cup final in that year, 2019. Memorably, though, in a semi-final that was so dramatic and a brilliant Watford comeback that will live long in the memory in the annals of Watford Football Club history, where, of course, Watford were down 2-0 to Wolves with less than 15 minutes to play before Gerard Deulofeu's brilliance and Troy Deeney's calm under fire were the difference in that comeback for Watford over Wolverhampton Wanderers. Of course, Javi Gracia that same season had given us the highest ever finish in our history in the Premier League and an 11th place finish. But for much of the campaign, we were really knocking on the doors of Europe, had a 4 out of 4 start for a 100% winning record to start the season. It was really a great one in which we beat Tottenham Hotspur by a score of 2-1 to be joint top for the early going, with the manager of the month of August being Javi Gracia. Gracia had, of course, also been very good as far as the first time he came into the club in 2018. Remember that year? He had been able to successfully mastermind Watford to a 0-0 draw against Stoke City, and then the very next game, his home debut for Watford, oversaw a 4-1 Watford win over Chelsea on a Monday night at the Vic under the lights, if you remember that one, capped off by Daryl Janmaat's memorable goal that gave Watford all 3 points, along with Troy Deeney's penalty as well. Yeah, this is Javi Gracia. He has a great track record here. He is well loved by the fans. It's a very good appointment. The thing is that Javi comes back to a very different Watford side. They're a much younger side than the side that he left in 2019. And look, this I think is going to be a very good appointment for Watford. He's not going to be chopping and changing the lineup. And I'll get to Paolo Pezzolano in a minute. Javi Gracia is going to have a much more stabilized lineup, probably going to do a 4-3-3 formation. You will definitely see Quadro Bar come back into the lineup. I'm pretty sure of that. And you'll also see back in the lineup, I'm pretty sure, Hector Cipriano, and I expect Matty Pollock also to be there as well in that back line of 4, not 3. And I think that you'll probably have Elaine drop to the bench. It's possible you might have him drop to the bench, and maybe even Jeremy Petrie as well. And so what you'll have is the regular starters. And I think Mark Bowler will come back as well. But we'll see how that looks next week, of course, against Sheffield United at Bramall Lane, which is going to be a must-win for Watford, of course, given Sheffield United's position. And, of course, the demands now on Javi Gracia. He's got 37 championship games to get Watford into the Premier League. That's pretty much what it has to be now for Watford. That's been the remit really from the owner from the start. After this really good transfer window in the summer, it's Premier League or bust at the minute, so promotion or bust. So whether it's through the playoffs or whether it's automatic, that is what the mission is this season. And after 3 wins, 3 draws, and 3 defeats, Paolo Pezzolano was shown the door by the owner. And look, I think it's going to take some time for Javi Gracia to get things the way they should be done at Watford. But the last manager just did not know how to use this squad. I was supportive of this manager that just left, because I thought that he was turning things around. I also said even after the Millwall match, well, we lost 1-0, that he needed to be given a bit more time. And I said, give him until the next international break. And if the results don't improve, then I can definitely understand if Gino wants to make a change. Well, the results did improve. They went three unbeaten in the space of 1 week, two wins and a draw, 7 points out of a total nine, and two come from behind wins, including and also a come from behind draw at Portsmouth. And so this sacking of Paolo Pezzolano was not about results. It was about the way he was treating this squad. He didn't get enough out of this squad, and he was going about trying to get something out of this squad in a very unorthodox way that didn't make any sense at all to me and to many, many other Watford FC supporters. And we were scratching our heads with the formations, the constant changing of the lineup, disrupting the rhythm and the chemistry of the side, and leaving some very discontented players out. Quadro Bar, it was no secret. You saw him during the Oxford match, when he came on in the 87th minute. He wasn't happy. You could see it in his face. You saw what happened at Portsmouth when Nestori Irankunda was subbed off after 35 minutes. Didn't make any sense to do that to him, humiliate the lad like that. And his reaction obviously was fitting for someone who really was humiliated and didn't appreciate what was happening. And he stormed off down the tunnel, and completely understandable that a young player would do that. But this was a destructive thing that the head coach did to the player. And despite all the public claims that everything had been smoothed out and that the air had been cleared, that was not proven to be true at all. There were lots of players who were not happy, in my estimation. I don't have the complete evidence in front of me, but it's clear that there were players that weren't happy at Watford, and this stuff that floated in the Watford Observer was clearly not true. Matty Pollock saying that the team was unified behind Paolo Pezzolano and enjoyed playing for him clearly was not true, because when the Watford statement came out yesterday that said that we want a manager here like Javi who will bring us, and I'm paraphrasing now, unity in the dressing room and togetherness in the dressing room and a stabilized starting lineup and a connection to the fans, well, there you go. It was proof through that statement that what Matty Pollock was saying, as reported by the Watford Observer, was not true at all. It was not true. I mean, maybe there were some players that enjoyed playing under Paolo Pezzolano because they were getting the requisite playing time. But you can't tell me that the players as a whole were happy and happy to play for Paolo Pezzolano. Not when Watford FC social media releases the very infamous video now of Pezzolano saying, "I'm not here to make friends." Now, I respect Paolo Pezzolano for saying that to a degree, certainly respect him, and I told you I supported him being here as long as the results kept being good, although I vehemently disagreed with the way he utilized the squad. I can respect a manager who says, "I'm not here to make friends." But when you're talking to a young squad of players, that's not going to go over well with them. It's not going to go over well with anybody, really. Veteran players handle that better and differently. Younger players will look at that as something very different, that you're not putting an arm around them. Some players need that. And what Paolo Pezzolano lacked, and the reason why Paolo Pezzolano was sacked, was not because of the result. He lacked an ability to deal with players as human beings. He lacked the ability to put an arm around the shoulder of a young player, to manage a player as a person, which to be a successful manager, you need to be able to manage people as well as manage things on the pitch. And Paolo Pezzolano didn't care to do the former, which led to his dismissal. And I think he got dismissed. Frankly, the decision was made after the Blackburn match when we played so poorly and lost that game by a score of 1-0. When Sir Elton was in the building and the owner was in the building and Duxbury was in the building and all these other people were in the building, and that display was really poor. And I think this whole thing with the players and Pezzolano was brewing over from even before the Blackburn match, as far as I'm concerned. And there was an international break before that. And as far as I'm concerned, I think there was things going on in that first international break and even before that. I saw less of the training stuff. Remember those videos that we'd see early on in training from this season from the Watford FC social media? You weren't seeing very much of those. You were seeing pictures, but you weren't seeing videos as much. And I think there was a breakdown even before the Blackburn game, as far as some of the Watford players were concerned. Adam Drury has reported, by the way, at the Watford Observer, that there was some training ground and training room confusion, training ground confusion and consternation, which would back up my assessment right now of, you've not seen a lot of those training videos over the last few weeks, at least less of them. And so there's obviously been stuff going on, I think, before the Blackburn match. And that match was in what, mid-September or something, late September or something like that, whenever that was. And so, that was a real, real problem that had been brewing. There was obviously discontent when Nestori Irankunda came off against Portsmouth. He was upset, clearly, but I don't think it was only about the humiliation of the moment that he was upset at. It was surely, in my opinion, things that were brewing beforehand that led up to what happened at Portsmouth. To say publicly that you're benching a 19-year-old because he didn't look fit or he didn't look sharp or he didn't have energy is just ridiculous. He's 19 years old. You know, he had played at that point, I think, 7 matches, including the Norwich match in the Carabao Cup. It just made no sense. Maybe 8 matches up to that point. 8 or 9, whatever it was. But it made no sense at that point to take him off. And the season had just started, so it's not like he didn't have energy. And even on an international where he had to go to New Zealand and to Australia and whatever, he's 19, he's got enough energy. And a lot of this squad is under the age of, most of it is under the age of 26 or 27. These are youngsters. And the idea that you're going to be benching players and benching youngsters for prolonged spells made no sense. He just didn't know what he was doing with his squad. He had no clue. He had no sense of how to utilize and get the best out of his team and out of his squad. And Mark Bowler was missing for 2 games or 3 games. That was really strange. You had Barr coming off the bench in the 87th minute against Oxford, the 85th minute against Portsmouth. It didn't make sense what he was doing. And again, there were people who were alarmed when Barr was being put on as a substitute when he had started some of the games. It made no sense. The manager said that he was doing this based on training, what he saw. But look, the bottom line is that Paolo Pezzolano never had a clue what the hell he was doing. The formations, the lineups, making changes here, making changes there, it was all over the map. He admitted against Blackburn after that Blackburn defeat that he got it all wrong. He admitted that publicly, which is something that managers don't often do. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But that admission by Pezzolano after the Blackburn match that he got things completely wrong, that he got it all wrong, to me was the biggest admission. There's much more than an admission about that game. I think it was more a cry for help, an admission that he didn't know what the hell he was doing anyway throughout these first few games. And I think the ownership took note of that, especially during that Blackburn match. And I think then that's when Gino made the decision to make sure that he would not have too much more of a shelf life as a Watford FC head coach for the men's first team. And I think that's exactly what happened. We'll find out if I'm right or wrong. But he only had 4 more games after that, didn't he? The game against Millwall that he lost, and then the 3 games in which his changes did lead to results and wins. So I give him credit there. But Gino had already made the decision, I think, long before those 3 results. And obviously that he did because, my goodness me, when you go 3 games in one week, undefeated, 2 of them wins, all of them come from behind situations. The decision was made way before that game against Oxford. It was made, I think, before the Millwall game as well, actually. And as I say, I think it was made against Blackburn. I think that's when everything came to a head. Terrible performance. And then the owner was left with no choice. He put out a call, and Javi Gracia answered. Well, sangria time at the Vic. And I think that Javi's going to do a much better job of getting a lot more out of his squad than Paolo Pezzolano did. And Paolo Pezzolano's exit statement, the public statement that he made on social media, on his social media channels on Instagram, you can look at that statement for yourself. Pezzolano DT is where you can find it on Instagram. Speaks volumes about Paolo Pezzolano. No mentioning of the fans, no thanking of the fans, no thanking even of the owner, no thanking really of anyone, really, except for maybe 1 or 2. But Paolo Pezzolano, you got a really insight into who he is based on what he said to players in the dressing room, that video that I mentioned earlier, And based on that statement that you really should read on his Instagram page, Pezzolano DT, read that statement. It's very revealing. And Gino did the right thing. Please subscribe on Substack, YouOrns on Substack, YouOrnswfc, the number one.substack.com. This has been the YouOrns observation.